I just sit here in front of. Hello, hello.
Hi, Dr. Brian Clement. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you
Let's see if
too.
I can sit up straight here and look sort of normal. I
I was gonna say that's the other guy. Does it look like you?
know. Well, you
Was
know
a
how
little
that is.
confused for a
We
second,
only hire people that look like me here.
right? To say you changed. I'm sure you probably don't remember me, but I went to your Life Change program. No, your the Health Educator program back in 2011 when Leah Dieter was there.
Oh, yes, 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 I do.
Yeah, and
How
then
have you been doing?
I'm good. Yeah, and my fiance actually, he's going to be on this call too. He's also the owner of the Wellness Trinity, and he went in 2010, and this is before we even knew each other. So when we met each other, it was kind of
Isn't
funny
that
because
interesting?
we
And so
both
you,
went to
you
Hippocrates.
actually were both here, like-minded people, and then you met and got married, or you're going to get
We're
married.
on the way to get married. Yeah. So
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. We started this business together, and we're so grateful because for what you've taught us and your work and how it's really been a catalyst for what we're doing right now too.
Well, good. I'm proud of you. You're out there helping people, and that's what matters.
Yeah, thank you so much. So it looks like it's about 12:15. Let's see, we have a few people on the call already. I'm gonna
What
wait.
time do you usually launch? You launch at 2:30 or 12:30, I mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. Right now it's 12:15 our time, 3:15 your time. So let me get back to my notes here. Okay, all right. So we're gonna get started here.
Are you out on the West Coast?
Yeah, we're actually in Las Vegas.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll be out in California from the 10th until whatever.
This
Closest I
month.
get to you is I'll be in the desert out in Palm Desert.
Oh, Palm Desert. Aren't you going? I think I heard you were coming to the to Las Vegas in June. I think it is for one of the festivals here.
I'm not. I don't know about that. You may be right. That's
you
my
know,
life. That's my life.
you just
Sometimes
go.
it's,
You just go where the schedule shows you to go.
I came out last year to a nice festival, and it was a plant-based festival, and Dr. Clapper was there, and Joel Furman was there, and so I
Oh,
don't know if
nice. Yeah, yeah. We were from California originally. We just moved here. I was from Las Vegas before. I mean, I lived in Las Vegas before, but decided to move back. And Las Vegas, the plant-based community is huge here. I'm
it's
noticing.
unbelievable. I went to this raw food restaurant there and lectured about 2 years. It's no longer there, but it was unbelievable. It was a
Yeah,
really good place. I mean, you have a conscious area.
yeah. So, okay, all right. Well, since it's a little past 12:15, let's get started here. I'm going to start with introduction. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining the Detox and Rejuvenation webinar. I am Dr. Jacqueline, naturopathic doctor and the owner of the Wellness Trinity, where we provide natural solutions for modern day wellness. I just wanted to first make a disclaimer for everyone that's watching. What we discuss in this webinar is for educational and entertainment purposes only. What you do with the information is to be used at your discretion, as the recommendations are not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure or prevent any diseases. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Brian Clement. Brian Clement, he is a PhD in LN. He has spearheaded the international progressive health movement for more than 3.5 decades. He is the director of the renowned Hippocrates Health Institute, in Florida, the world's foremost complementary residential health center. Over the last half century, he and his team have pioneered clinical research and training in disease prevention using hundreds of thousands of participants who provided volumes of data, giving Clement a privileged insight into the lifestyle required to prevent disease, enhance longevity, and maintain vitality. Their findings have provided the basis for Hippocrates' progressive, state-of-the-art treatments and programs for health maintenance and recovery, their life transformation program. Brian Clement has written 20 plus books focused on health, spirituality, and natural healing. Among them are Living Foods for Optimum Health, Longevity, Life Force, which Dr. Colin Campbell calls one of the most important books ever written on nutrition. Supplements Exposed, published in 2010, reveals the pharmaceutical fraud rampant in the sales, production, and distribution of worthless and harmful vitamin pills. Additionally, The volume of Brian Clement's third volume series, Food is Medicine, was published in 2012, along with his 7 keys to lifelong sexual vitality. Brian Clement is a devoted husband and a caring father of 4, who, along with his wife, Anna Maria Gons Clement, PhD, LN, co-directs the Hippocrates Health Institute. In addition to his research studies, Clement conducts conferences worldwide on attaining health and creating longevity, giving humanity a roadmap for redirecting, enriching, and extending their lives. A licensed nutritionist, Brian Clement is a graduate of the University of Science, Arts, and Technology, where he has earned his PhD. Wow, that was a mouthful. So thank you again, Brian Clement, for Dr. Brian Clement, for being on this webinar today. We are all honored to have you here, and we are going to be recording this and also being able to put on our social media so more people can also see what's going on in the natural health world and how you've really got to the root of helping so many people find their healing. It's just, it's such an honor to have you here today.
Well, it's nice to be with you.
So before I start asking you some questions, I just kind of wanted to debrief on what I learned personally in the program. And then, we'll go from there. I'll ask you some questions, and then we'll see if anyone has questions on the webinar today. So let's see. Well, first of all, I went to Hippocrates, if people weren't listening to us before, in 2011, and I got a lot of education. I left and I didn't know, I left a vegan. I was mostly there and I left a vegan, and I was, didn't really know how to get back into the world right away, but step by step, I started making changes and, was able to, now today I'm drinking E3 Live and, growing my wheatgrass, and everyone that knows me as a naturopathic doctor knows about green juices and enemas. So anyone that is watching this today, you can thank Dr. Brian Clement for all the enemas that you guys are doing and the green juice that you were drinking and wheatgrass you're putting up your butt. So the other thing is Paul decided, he's my fiance, and also he's a business owner of the Wellness Trinity too. He went in 2010, and when we met, we had this mutual Hippocrates education in common, and which was great because it really helped build this business that we're doing. So what we learned at Hippocrates, the biggest thing was about having most of your diet sprouts and a good portion of it wheatgrass, lots of green juices, all raw and vegan. We learned a lot of different natural therapies, including the enemas and implants, like I mentioned. No caffeine, chocolate, meat, dairy, low or little fruit, once you have nothing like candida. No fish or fish oils. Living for a purpose and healing your mind, body, and spirit. As we have to look at our body as a whole. So there's so many questions that we can ask and dissect with all that. And I'm sure with my long list of questions here, we're only probably going to tackle a few, and feel free to expand as much as you want on any of the topics we talk about, because I know they're all very important. But one of the first things that we, Paul and I wanted to ask you and address to the audience is, what is the best water to drink?
Well, that's pretty simple to know. Back when I was writing my book, Killer Fish, I had the opportunity to speak to 3 of the world's 7 top oceanographic scientists and marine biologists. And they all told me the same sad news, that every drop of water that we drink on Earth now is at some level contaminated with not only the obvious heavy metals and other chemicals, but also plastics and pharmaceutical drugs. So in the North Pole and South Pole, there's pharmaceutical drugs, heavy metals, and plastics in the drinking water. Now that's because of rain. They're nanoparticles. Now, for the average person listening to us today, the only accessible and affordable unit that takes those out in great part is distillation. So distillation is the way that we want people to go. Spring water, well water, reverse osmosis water, do not take this out. And so it's pretty simple choice. And you can buy a distiller for a reasonable amount. I've had mine for 47 years. It never broke. Use it every single day. And this way you're taking care of something even more important than the food you ingest. Remember, 70% of your body is water. Every one of us should be drinking at least half our body weight in ounces every single day. And if you're putting impurities in, I don't care if you're a vegan, I don't care if you're eating organic food, I don't care if you're exercising, have a great life, and have a great mind. The fact of the matter is you can die if you drink contaminated water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I do biofrequency scans, and I see water contaminants in everybody. And as much as I've been working on their diet and supplements and all the other kind of stuff, that's been a huge question of mine. And we've been getting ozonated water. How do you feel about that?
Well, ozone takes out the bad things like bacteria, microbes, etc. But you have to purify the water before you ozonate the water. So the truth of the matter is, taking tap water and ozonating it doesn't do a darn thing to it, except take out the bad biology.
Okay, so you distill it and then you ozonate it.
Absolutely. And I'm for ozonated water. Although you get minuscule amounts of oxygen, you do receive some oxygen from that. Yeah.
And it's we were learning, I don't know if it was from you. Paul's been watching a lot of your documentaries lately as we've been preparing for this webinar, but isn't most of the oxygen that we get from water?
Yes. As a matter of fact, water is hydrogen and oxygen, H2O. And so you actually receive more oxygen from drinking water. This is why water consumption is powerfully important than you do breathing. And so anyone who's ever been dehydrated, I've never felt worse in my life when I was dehydrated. What's happening is when the oxygen is cut off to the brain, you actually start to become lethargic and can die from it. It's oxygen deprivation you're dying from.
Okay. So as long as it's distilled, you should be able to get enough water. Because I found that there are certain waters that, like, I'll get purified water from the water store and I still feel like I'm thirsty.
Yeah. Well, the reality is, we'll go back and expound on this. Back during the 19th century, there was a naturalist from Austria who basically started to realize in nature, whenever you looked at water, be it rivers or streams or brooks or waterfalls, the water comes down and moves in a vortex. Large circle at the top, small circle at the bottom. What that's literally doing in nature is organizing the structure of the water. Now, I don't want to confuse the listeners, but what water really is not just hydrogen and then the next molecule, oxygen. It's hydrogen, hydrogen, oxygen. When you look at the chains, how it absorbs better, how your body hydrates easier. You have a hydrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, so you can take the distilled water. You don't need a fancy alkalizing unit. You basically put it in a bottle, get a gallon jar that somebody's throwing out, clean it, and spin it for about 10 to 15 seconds. And what you're really doing is organizing the structure of the water, making it more hydratable at that point.
So, like, I have a jar with glass right now. So if
that's right. So take it. Let's do it right now. People are watching us. Take hand on the bottom and the hand on the top. Go ahead and do it for everyone now.
So, like,
no, the opposite. So you can't turn it. So the water's filled. You can't do it. But if you had it enclosed, excuse me. If you had it enclosed and you put your hands like this, you would spin it like this.
And okay. So if it was sitting on the table, I would go like this?
No. You actually take the whole jar in your hand, turn it horizontal.
If it was closed. So
turn it horizontal if it's closed, and just spin it for about 10 seconds. Okay. We always joke and say, put salsa music on and have fun.
Dancing with your water. And so when you dance with your water, you get more hydrated.
Much more hydrated. And
that's wonderful.
Hydration is pretty important. I mean, as you know, when we deal with people like you who are healthy and sensible who come here to maintain youth and health, and people who are really sick that are dying. And one of the things our medical team keeps an eye on here constantly is the hydration part of it, because if you dehydrate it, you can to your knees quicker than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what I found with doing hair mineral analysis tests, that like people will be excreting a lot of their potassium when their adrenals are really stressed.
Absolutely.
And so they're not going to be as hydrated too, right?
Absolutely. And the adrenals being stressed is so common. I mean, the average person today who doesn't think they have stress probably have adrenals that are stressed 100 times more than somebody 100 years ago.
Oh, yeah. And do you think that's mostly just because of the environment, or?
Well, you know, we exposed ourselves to rare things and new things that we never did before. I mean, your generation, as an example, completely grew up with a cell phone. You wouldn't know how to function without a cell phone. That's an abnormal process. If you go back to my great-grandfather's generation, they didn't have automobiles. My Tesla today, I'll drive 80 miles an hour home. If I put a man from 1850 into the car and did that, most likely he, or if I had a woman in there, would die of a heart attack. We get on planes and we fly 600-700 miles an hour. We don't think of these. We take these things for granted. So watching television, you know, the list goes on.
Yeah.
And so we are all in modern culture and society exposing the human body to something that has never, ever been exposed to, in some cases until the last 10 years, and in some cases the last 70 years. And because of that, we haven't evolved, we haven't adapted and evolved to a point where this is without stress. So this is why the adrenal glands are pumping, you know, cortisol out like it's never seen before. We're in fight and flight from the reptilian brain all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually that brings me up to my next point. We've been, unfortunately, we moved next to some power lines and some cell phone towers, and that was definitely not something I wanted at all. This is a very short-term solution, but it's made me more aware of like, okay, what can people do to protect themselves against EMFs?
Well,
like I have this black tourmaline I carry around with me. I have a few pieces in my pocket, but you know, those things that you can wear. But I mean, what's really good? I don't know for sure.
So the listeners do not realize, because we've been seduced into thinking that somebody higher than us is protecting us. They're not. During the Clinton administration, they did a landmark study to see whether or not cell phones gave brain cancer. They fudged the study, said no, and then later it was exposed that they actually discovered it did create brain cancer. And so high tension wires, there was a study done here in Boca Raton, Florida, not far from Hippocrates, where they put a middle school, you know, young teens or preteens into the school, and the ADD rates went up 5 times, and absenteeism went up, you know, 4 times. And they finally did a study and realized it was the high tension wires, and the cancer rate doubled in that school. And they won that, and they finally moved the high tension wires. So these are things that we have to be concerned about. About 5 years ago, when I was speaking in Germany, a doctor came to visit with me and had read everything I'd ever written, and basically said, I concur with you, and I think you'd understand what I'm doing. I'm working with Russians, and we figured out the most effective way to protect yourself from electromagnetic fields. But he's a typical scientist, so we asked him to make a device that people could wear, but he couldn't quite get that together. He's brilliant at science, but not really at marketing. And so Anna Maria, who you know, worked with him for 2.5 years, and now this year, January of this year, we came out with the strongest device on the planet called High Pulse, HHI meaning Hippocrates Health Institute Pulse. And it works at a 360-degree angle. And what it really is they took fiber, and they weaved it together geometrically so that it actually attracts electromagnetic frequencies, renegade electromagnetic frequencies. And then they ground up in a particulate fashion quartz crystal, and they smothered this cloth with it. And so this pulse, I'm wearing one right now, you won't be able to see it, but this should be worn and affixed to every one of us around the solar plexus 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I have an electric car. I mean, there's so many things that we're being exposed to. You and I sit in front of a computer right now. We're being exposed to that. Of course, all of our computers here are protected at Hippocrates, but does that mean everyone's are?
So what do you do to protect your computer?
So then there is GIA, And very soon, we're now taking that German technology and we're going to employ it. Hippocrates will have a super level protector for computers, for even electric cars, for routers in your home. So even when the router's not off at night, which it should be, we're going to put it on there when you're using the computer and have to have the router on.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Paul and I were both thinking about that because we've thought about going to Hippocrates again at some point, and he is on the computer for his work during the day. And he's like, well, they have Wi-Fi now. I wonder what they do to protect themselves, because obviously we know you know
one of the new technologies we've been using here for a while now is called QRS out of Germany. And what we did is we disassembled one of the machines and we affixed it to the top of Wigmore Hall. And literally the entire Institute's campus of 55, 60 acres have this healing pulsation going out with scalar waves 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we very much took care of it here. And more awareness is coming up worldwide. And you're going to see, although we created this at Hippocrates, you're going to see this being commercially available, not by us, but by the engineers and companies that are making these things.
Oh, that's great. So if any of the listeners or we wanted to purchase these things, we can go on your website. Is that how we can find out?
Yeah, on their website, or give a call to the shop here on campus. And you can look up, the magazines would have things about this in it. So QRS is available, but at least get immediately, all of the listeners, you and your loved ones and friends should be wearing these high pulses. It's just incredibly important. You could eat right and think right and exercise, as you know, and end up sick because you're being zapped by electroradiation.
Yes, yeah, I'm totally with you on that. And it's been a huge question of mine, especially now with this 5G network. So do you find that this is going to be effective with the 5G network as well?
Yes, it is. And because this is universal spectrum frequencies. But the truth is, with 5G, what we're doing now is permeating neurons more than we have with the 3 and 4G. And so you're going to see a lot more mental disorders, a lot more learning disorders, a lot more depression from the use of the 5G. As you remember, all of these digital technologies also cross-circuit the brain.
Yeah.
Up until now, everything's been analog. So as an example, a very astute ear, not mine, but a very astute ear, goes back to records, because they can actually hear the flow, the natural biological flow in the record, where if you take a CD, it's little bullets, little pieces of squares of sound that come to you, or digital full spectrum TVs. Your brain is actually being exposed to segmentation, and that destroys the neurological system and literally confuses the brain. Wow. So this 5G, I can't tell you everything I've read about it from the physicists that I follow and read, say this is really going to bring us to a deeper level of dysfunction.
Yeah, I mean, this world's already kind of going a little crazy. We don't need any more of that.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, well, I'm really happy to know, I know you're always ahead of in pioneering, this field. And that's great to know that there's answers, even though we are living in this crazy world. So, a lot of people think we can do this stuff with diet alone. And I'm like, no, we need supplements. We need to protect ourselves from these EMFs. My next question is so I understand what you're doing is you're protecting the body from the EMFs that are coming in. So what about if someone's already has that, dirty radiation in their body? How do you detox them from that?
What you have to do, there's new cushions or insoles that you put into your shoes that coming out of Toronto, Canada. I'm so bad, I know the science, but I forget the product names. But you can put this up on your website later, that not only ground you, but work with the power points in your foot. So literally, in a way, it's electromagnetically detoxifying you. So powerful. It's stunning to me. When I was first presented with this, I thought it was an embellishment. I thought it was a lie. That it creates balance in people. Now, a study that came out about 3 years ago stunned all of us. They said after the ripe young age of 50 years old, we're not talking about 90 years old, every year you become 1.5% more feeble. And so you imagine natural biological fibrillity where you can't stand as long, you get a little thrown off, when you're going in an elevator, your head spins. This was made for that purpose, but works perfectly well to detoxify the electromagnetic pollutants that have created neurological disorder in you.
Wow.
So I apologize for not remembering the name, but it's only one set of these inserts that you put into your insoles that do this. And the Indian North American doctor that created it is brilliant, I'll tell you.
Wow. Okay, well, we'll have to look into that, and I'll put a link on my show notes later on when we figure that out. So, on that note of stress and, the adrenals, the other thing I was wondering about is caffeine. Lots of people are drinking caffeine, and that's the one thing people don't want to give up is their coffee. My bad habit was green tea. I guess, for Hippocrates diet, that's not good either, right?
Right. Well, let's talk about it. I mean, coffee and tea both have an enormous amount of caffeine, but so does chocolate, and chocolate has a secondary element that literally is more aggressive than caffeine. Now, if you say coffee to me or tea, the biggest concern I have is the acidity in it. Now, all of you know this to be true, but you've disacknowledged it. If you look at the teeth of people that consume massive amounts of coffee or tea, it's actually pitted and brown. That's acidity doing that. Now, the same acidity that can take hard tissue, like a rock, your teeth, and break it down. Can you imagine what it does to the sheathing on your nerves? This is why you see people that drink a lot of coffee literally are very nervous people, because actually the covering, the protection on their nerves is now gone, or in great part gone. So it's a problem. Caffeine acts like a narcotic. The most successful restaurant in history was Starbucks. I forget how many they were building a week at one point, but why? It's a drug dealer. So it's an addictive substance. And so when you constantly will go out of your way and spend $5 for a 10-cent cup of coffee, it just shows you. I mean, coffee and sugar, it's really ironic that people put sugar in their coffee, are the two most addictive substances known to man, by the way.
Yeah.
When we say known to man, we're talking about cocaine. Did you see the study that came out on sugar back in December last year? That they actually now discovered all sugars, including fructose, is 20 times more addictive than cocaine. And caffeine comes in at a very, very addictive level, very close to that, much more than illicit drugs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just so funny that, we'll put down alcohol or cocaine, or even some people don't like marijuana, but, we have caffeine and sugar that seems almost worse than that, and yet that's allowed in modern day life.
Dope and non-accepted dope, that's it.
Right.
It's funny, but that's the way people think, what's blessed and what's not blessed.
Yeah. So, this might sound like a silly question, but how important then do you think, I have people come to me and they want to detox and they still want to have their coffee. So how important do you think it is to get rid of every single source of caffeine when they are detoxing?
Well, number one, I think it's powerfully important because as you become cleaner, you become stronger, your immune system builds, and you become more vulnerable. So if you're polluted and clogged and have coatings of disorder on your organ systems, and now those deadly things are gone, and now you're taking caffeine, it actually accelerates the problem because you become faster, higher, more degraded. Acidity will permeate deeper into the cells of the body. So, my problem with people generally today is people are without values. They don't have real core values anymore. That, they go with the wind and whatever is popular, or whatever they're told, or whatever. Just look at politics today. They actually lie and lie and lie, and people start to believe the lie. And the population is just completely out of touch with reality generally. And they're willing to vote for people that actually go against their good. The same thing with this. I mean, if you say you want to be healthy, well, then let's be healthy. Don't make compromise. You're not a little pregnant ever. You're pregnant or you're not pregnant. And you're not a little healthy or, or not healthy. You're either healthy or not. And the truth of the matter is people have got, in my opinion, people have got to take life really serious and realize that life's a gift, that it's a damn gift. And we better humble ourselves and appreciate it and not need all of these diversionary tactics, not go out of our way to fog our brains or to be less clear. You know, you mentioned grass before. When I was a kid for 10 years, I smoked grass practically every day. I was stoned every day. I don't know how I functioned. Don't know how I went to school. I don't know how I drove a car. And I finally gave it up when I was very young. And about 3 years after that, I happened to be at a festival and somebody was passing around a joint and I took a toke of it. And I was pissed off for 4 days. And it took me about 5 years after that to realize what I had done. I was feeling so low about myself, feeling so bad about who I was when I was a young man, that when I liberated myself from getting high, I felt better. Once I felt good about myself, it pissed me off. It pissed me off to divert my attention from that. And it's really interesting. And caffeine is no different than that. It's an illicit substance. I mean, just because it's legal. Just like people say drugs and alcohol. Shit, alcohol is the worst drug ever created on the planet Earth. There's no drug worse. I mean, I never worry when I'm driving on the road about cocaine addicts or heroin addicts killing me in the car. It's an alcoholic that I'm worried about. Right. I don't know many families that break up because their father's on heroin or cocaine. It's because their father was a drunk. You know, socially accepted nonsense is what it is.
Yeah. And you know what, I never had a problem with alcohol or anything like that, but the green tea, because I had adrenal fatigue. Yeah,
that's an addictive substance.
Once I actually was like, okay, I got to put a stop to this, then that's when I realized personally what my body really needed. And I think that goes for any type of drug. You know, once you can actually get rid of all, the drug that you're using, then it opens up that door for you to realize.
That's a wonderful thing.
Tyrosine or something.
You're right. It's a wonderful thing to share. When you're on what we call the dope train, whatever that dope is, whatever the substance, overeating, sugar, whatever it may be, you're basically desensitized. You're not conscious. Your thoughts, your attitude is being governed by stimulus or depressant. It's not being governed by spiritual understanding. And so you become enlightened. That's why every religion and spiritual belief in the world talks about clean diets. Reason for that. It's not just haphazard that happened.
Yeah, no, I totally believe it too. You know, I'm a Christian and I don't necessarily believe like your food is going to make you like, you know, more loved by God. But I do feel like when your brain is clear, you just feel better and you can, you know, think better and, you know, you're happier.
You're right. And the punchline is that God's inside of you, not outside of you. So if you start to love and kiss and support spiritual existence, you become more aware. Not better, not more enlightened. Nobody's better or more enlightened. That's all bullshit. It's arrogant stuff. But what you become is you. You know, the struggle we have as human beings today is just to be human. It's not to be superhuman. It's just, if we could just be human, because human is perfect. Human is loving. Human is good. Human is contributory. Human is kind. We've so broken down our image of who we are. We think we're bad people, and we're not that. If you were to all be put in a position, all of us listening today, to say that what's the one thing that we all want? If you were candid and honest, you want love. You want to be loved, and you want love. That's what all of us desire. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and on that note of spirituality and, you know, I also, the other thing that comes up is emotional healing and also spiritual healing. So how much of that do you believe is important in people's journey and their health and detox?
Well, you know, here, that's the number one detox. Everyone that comes to Hippocrates through the Life Transformation Program sees psychotherapists. It's the most important thing we do here. Because until you get rid of what we call your mental fog, your mental trash, your self-loathing, you will not eat right. You will not exercise. You won't find healthy relationships. You'll have a job you hate. You get in a marriage you should break up in. And so you're a self-saboteur. Now, this is an interesting story. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was on a long lecture tour. I just came off one, 3 weeks in Europe, a country a day. And as the plane was landing here in West Palm Beach, I had this revelation. Every once in a while, I was so exhausted, my brain sort of opened up. And I realized that the emotions of a person is actually a representation of your spiritual depth or lack of spiritual depth. So I wrote a book. It's called Emo Spirit. And people are really interested in this. I'm not trying to sell a book. I'm telling you, this I really think pinned it, got it right. And I put the word emotion and spirit together because I actually believe that who we are as individuals, what our contribution is, how we live our lives, what we choose to do, who we choose to be with, who we choose to love, how we choose to work, is actually spiritual. It's not an emotional process or a physical process. It's actually our living out our spiritual understanding. And so when we start to see, as you've pointed out a minute ago, your emotional state improving and becoming more stable and not needing a substance to hide from you, it's actually a process of a spiritual evolution. And I believe that we are really spiritual people. We're not physical people. We're not emotional people. And, Emo Spirit, I really loved writing that book. It's sort of a stream of consciousness came to me and put it together.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great explanation of that. I do live and dry blood cell analysis, thanks for Hippocrates inspiration. I'll see that the pattern in the dry blood with their emotions and different things that have happened. Can you explain to listeners how this actually, your emotions get imprinted in cells?
This is, matter of fact, I was telling the story here in class today. Anna Maria was one of the leaders in dark field analysis, as you know, and she was training a lot of the doctors for decades. We moved on to different technologies now. But one of the tricks that we had is 80% of our guests return here. And some of them we get to know intimately. We know them better than we do family members. They're here every 6 months, every year. And those people, when they would come into Anna's office and we were doing the microscopic investigation, we would actually see their cells flowing. And Anna Marie would call me. And I knew that a minute later I would come from, my office used to be next to hers when you were here. And I would come from my office to her and get into the room and scream at the top of my lungs. And the guest would look at me like I had gone kooky. And we did to do a little bit of an experiment. And what was really, really interesting is in 100% of the cases, we did this about 138 times, 139, times. And in 100% of the cases, free-flowing cells that were moving in the way that, without rouleau, without what it should be, clumped together and went into the corner like they were finding a way to hide from a monster.
Wow.
Simultaneously, 60 seconds, 30 seconds to 60 seconds. The emotional state was actually represented in the cellular pattern.
Wow.
And, Anna was about ready to write a book years ago on the emotional findings she found, which was more interesting to her on dark field than anything else.
Yeah.
You're right. You must be astute. You're getting it. You're picking it up. You should have a talk with her about it. I watched it. She was the expert in it. Yeah.
I would love to talk to her about that. I think it's, we're the wellness trinity for a reason. We see we're mind, body, and spirit, and we have emotions. We have all these parts, and we can't neglect one if we really want to get to the root of people's health challenges. And
you've got to feed your spirit, and feeding your spirit is emotional strength as well as biological strength. And, most of you listening were Jews or Christians growing up. It says it on page 1 to live this way. One, it tells you to do this. There's a reason for that. I know when I started to fast years ago, then I finally realized the only time I'd ever heard about fasting is in spiritual writings. And there's a reason for that. It's to liberate yourself, to go to a higher place, not external, but internal.
So, we only have a few more minutes, and I know you have to run. All this stuff is so fascinating, and just so many questions that I've just been dying to pick your brain at. I guess we might as well talk a little bit about the diet. People are always going to be curious about that. The raw vegan and why there's no fruit. And I'll let you. Why don't you pick out a few things? What do you think our listeners should know about? That's very, very key and important to know.
As you know, because you were one of our good students here, over the decades, we discovered the 4 elements within the living food, the proper living food, that protected you from premature aging, helped you prevent and reverse disease. And that's hormones, oxygen, phytonutrients, and enzymes.
Mhm.
Now, as many of you listening know, because you're probably a better than average astute audience, women and men go for hormonal therapy, bioidentical hormonal therapy. That's all made from plants. Now, what hormones are the language of the body. It's how cells communicate with one another.
Mhm.
If you can eat plants, by the way, you won't have premature menopause or premature menstruation or all of the things people are suffering with today. Men won't have the level of prostate cancer, and emotional stability will reign, etc. Oxygen, the only two natural ways you get oxygen is breathing and from what you ingest, water, which we spoke about, and food. And where the most oxygen is in green leafy plants.
Mhm.
And the highest level of them are sprouts or edible weeds. Highest
Mm.
level of oxygen.
Mhm.
Phytonutrients, we could do a 10-hour show on that alone. That's a remarkable medicine we found in raw plant-based foods, only plant-based foods. That's the most powerful medicine ever discovered in the history of modern science. So throughout the entire history of science, we haven't found anything more healing than phytochemicals that are in every plant for free.
Mm.
And enzymes, which, you know, your body's electric.
Mhm.
So when I look at your body, I'm looking more at an electrical body than I am a biochemical body.
Mhm.
Where do you get your energy to keep that electric body going? In enzymes, which is only in raw food. So hormones, oxygen, phytochemicals, and enzymes all are completely gone once you heat the food above 116, 118. Gone. They don't exist. So that's number one, why raw food. Number two, fruit, which I believe was the original diet of man, no question. It's a perfect food. It falls from a tree, you pick it up, eat it, throw the seed out, it grows another tree. But we started to mess with that. The Chinese started to mess with it thousands of years ago. We started to hybrid fruit. Now, the average fruit today has 30 times more sugar than the ancestral fruit. The human body's pancreas, which regulates blood sugar, no longer functions because we're the third or fourth or fifth generation that have been eating massive amounts of complex sugars. You know, white sugar, honey, maple syrup, the worst, agave syrup. You know, all of this stuff is nonsense. It actually destroys the pancreas. And so now the fruit has massive sugar in it. Our body doesn't have a pancreas to regulate the sugar, so it ends up staying in the blood. And if you're really unlucky, you immediately get low blood sugar, hypoglycemia, or diabetes. But if you don't, it will feed cancer, and it will feed viruses, and it will feed mold, and it will feed fungus, and it will feed bacteria.
Right.
Worse than that, it ages you. You read my series of books as a health educator for the doctors, right? Food is medicine. I have a whole chapter on how fruit sugar ages you.
Wow.
A little bit of fruit that's ripe and organic in a healthy person's diet, perfectly fine. But when you're sick with any of those diseases I just mentioned, you avoid fruit and all sugars like the plague.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like when someone has healthy looking cells, one or two pieces a day, I think is what you said, right?
Absolutely. You know, think about it, 15% of by weight of your diet. So you say 1 or 2 pieces a day. How about if it's 1 20-pound watermelon? You got to watch how you say this. So if you look at your overall diet, if you're eating a pound of food, 15% of that pound basically can be fruit sugar. But ripeness is important too, as you recall. No fruit, including organic fruit, is intentionally picked ripe. They cannot pick ripe fruit and ship it and bring it to the store. It would rot. So they pick it a month, 2 months, 3, 4, 5 months early. And it literally rapes the body. It comes in and sucks nutrition out of the cells, out of the bones, out of the teeth. And this is another problem beyond the sugar content. Now, I don't want to make fruit sound like it's evil, but the truth of the matter is we've made it evil because we've messed with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, man, I have so many more other questions for you, but our time is up here. So how can our listeners get a hold of your institute or information that your books, anything that you have to offer? Because there's so much that you offer to the world.
Well, number one, we have a magazine that comes out quarterly, and you can sign up that for free. You can get on the internet. Most of the people, obviously everyone listening to us now is internet savvy. So get on the Hippocrates website, and there you can find out all the books and offerings and what we do and upcoming programs and where I'm traveling in the world to speak. Before you got on, with me. We're talking, I'm going to be in California now from the 10th until the 18th, I think. And I just got back from 5 countries in Europe. And then I'll be in Israel and I'll be in Turkey and countries like that in June. So all of that can come to you from Hippocrates Institute.org. We're a nonprofit, as you know. So HIPPOCRATES Institute, INSTITUTE.org. And then it will come up. And you can actually see ever since 1980, all of the magazines that we've printed too, with wonderful stories about people who reverse cancers and multiple sclerosis and HIV and easy things like diabetes, which isn't a disease, and heart disease. And you may want to read those stories. There's hundreds and hundreds of those.
Yeah, definitely. I had one from my experience too, back in 2011. So anyway, well, thank you so much, Dr. Brian Clement. And, I hope maybe we can talk more and get more into some of the other details, but I really do appreciate your time, and that, it's such a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure really encourage the audience and, the future audience that's going to listen to this, and, when we put it up on YouTube and other social media platforms. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me, and keep up your good work. Okay. Everyone be well out there in the world. Be optimistic. Everything's going to be okay.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.